Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Yair Vardi, the founding partner of Fusion LA, a venture-backed accelerator for Israeli startups in the United States. Fusion invests $110,000 in each company and selectively accepts 6 to 9 teams every 6 months to go through an intensive go-to-market and mentorship-driven program. Yair, welcome.
Great to be here.
We're excited for you to be here and for this call. The theme of today's discussion, as we said, is the role of the 8200 unit in Israel's tech success. Can we start with hearing a little bit about how you wound up in the unit and your role and experience there?
Sure. So I grew up in Ramat Gan in the center of Israel. And I think like most Israelis, when they're 16, if you're not Haredi or not Arab, you're going to get called to Tzav Shmone, which meaning a series of physical and psychometric exams and in a base close to home. I did, when I went to high school in Israel, I did a concentration in sciences, computer sciences, but also in Arabic. And I was invited to the intelligence pre-screening after you do those series of tests. And that's another 5 or 6 sessions that you do of interviews, team analysis, also some meeting with psychologists and others. And after that, you get selected to a cadet course. Our cadet course, our specific section was only like 120 people every year that get to that specific role in the intelligence corps. In 8200, there's, let's say, those different cadet course just before you join the military for specific roles that people get handpicked to be part of. And I always like to say that the intelligence corps in Israel, also the Air Force and the Special Forces in Israel have priority when it comes to selection of the Israeli youth. And it's kind of like, you know, giving the IDF, it's kind of like the biggest HR recruiting firm in Israel that have an access to all the data that you want on relatively on kids in their teenagers. And you end up getting to a specific role. Specifically, I was privileged to be part of 8200 with people that have similar characteristics or skill set. Mine was geared towards intelligence analysis, but the truth is that I didn't know what I'm going to do before I got selected.
That's amazing. So really your process started way before even service is mandatory at 18. So that's great that it started from such an early age. I do want to let the audience know that unfortunately, Shana Zilcha was not able to join us today. She did have a family emergency. So we're going to have the pleasure of just hearing from Yair. Yair, one of the reoccurring themes we've heard from many graduates of the unit is how they learn to thrive in chaos. In fact, Nadav Zafir, former commander of the 8200 unit, is quoted as saying the most creative innovation happens on the edge of chaos. What are your thoughts on that quote, and what impact does that mentality have on entrepreneurs and innovators? Do you see this as something unique to Israeli innovators? And how does thriving in chaos impact their risk tolerance?
So I had the privilege to be a young officer when Nadav Zafir was the 8200 commander. Specifically, I didn't mention, but per your last question, we were, me also my co-founder for Fusion, both of us were dealing with the Palestinian arena. You can call that chaos, but we served during a couple of like military operations. Also, that was during the time that Gilad Shalit was still captive in Gaza Strip, and just the day-to-day of supporting with intelligence operations in the West Bank or Gaza Strip, or when our neighbors were involved in smuggling weapons or just political negotiation. All of that you can describe as chaos, I think. And many times what you're dealing with in the unit is a small team that is tasked to deliver a very specific result. And you work, and like most teams in 8200 are multidisciplinary teams. So you work, I had worked you tasked on a mission and you work with a computer engineer and you work with a linguistic and you have to coordinate with other agencies. That could be the Shin Bet or the Mossad or other intelligence, or you need to communicate things quickly and in a timely manner. And you do that when you're 19 or 20 or 21, and you work on infrastructure that is multi-million-dollar infrastructure, government supported. So I think that's what, when you have a lot of resources in your hand, and things are important. So I think that experience is, when you start your startup, after you discharge or a few years later, definitely has an impact on you. And you can work day and night to deliver result and outcomes. And those are characteristics of startup founders that I think those who have served in the unit or other units in the military have. Those are great characteristics to have. And Israelis are known to be good in crisis management. I think it's great for those blitz of 24, 48 hours or sprints to build a new product. The truth is that many times we now, as an accelerator that is based in the US, trying to help Israeli founders think more long-term and think strategically on their business plan. And those are things that maybe sometimes Israelis are not as good.
Well, definitely dealing with what's happening in Gaza and West Bank makes, a 24-hour blitz probably a little bit less life and death emergency, but it's definitely a chaotic theater to be in. So you deal with Israeli startups all the time, day and night. Compare some of the traits that you see in entrepreneurs that went through this unit versus the entrepreneurs that did not.
So the truth is that we've invested in many veterans of the security forces and the IDF. We've done few investments. We've done a few investments in Air Force pilots and commando guys and paratroopers and other engineers and other units that are not AD-200. And it's hard for me to compare the traits or the outcomes. The truth is we're a young firm, so we've done investments in the past 3 years. We've been quite active. We've done like 50 investments. Part of what we're trying to do right now is actually collect the data on the founders we're investing in as part of the DD process and as part of the screening process. And maybe in 5 years, I think when we're gonna see some outcomes, I can let you know if those are, which correlates better. But what we do have as part of that is that we can use the fact that we know where founders have served just to streamline diligence process quickly, because you have better insights on the CTO if you know that he or she has served in a specific section, and you know what are the type of stuff that they've dealt over there. But that's my short answer. That's my thoughts about it.
So you basically have everyone's resume before you even see them, and you know what training and everything they went through.
We asked that. That's part of our screening process. We asked the founders to complete a questionnaire, and part of that is also what they've done in the military. And many times you also get, like here, it's like warm introductions from people that you served with or Israel is already a village, so it's hard. It's easy to jump on a call or find out who was the commander of who and who served with who very quickly, and that's a great way to streamline the diligence process.
Do you find a lot of the unit, a lot of the investors are different for people who have gone through the military compared to those who have not?
I almost it's rare that I found Israeli founders that we meet that were not part of the IDF.
And does their background really impact your investment strategy?
Not sure. As I mentioned, we've done few investments. For us, it's mainly about the teams. So we do look for a fully committed team that has a strong CTO or a tech lead within the founding team members, which you'll find in many Israeli companies. And if there happen to be ex-8200 or Air Force or Special Forces, so it just, as I mentioned, easier, quick decision and faster for us to make a decision based on their characteristics.
Yeah. So I would like to remind everyone that if you have a question, please email me at bporush@aipac.org, or you can use the chat function. So Yair, for the last several years, you've been building a successful early stage accelerator, Fusion LA, for Israeli startups. It's been said that in many ways, the unit is essentially a tech incubator. What have you taken from the unit as you build out your business and mentor young entrepreneurs?
So first and foremost, my co-founder, both of us we met both in the military, both of us fellow 8200 officers. And the truth is, I think it's the network. That's number one, because we are fortunate to be part of all of our friends are somewhere in the tech ecosystem in Israel. We are both involved in the Veterans Association of 8200, which opened us doors. My co-founder Guy sits on the board of the 8200 Alumni Association and also served as the managing director of the 8200 Veterans Association accelerator program in Israel. So I think I try to compare the unit to be part of an MBA school here in the States, or an MBA network, or maybe a fraternity that you can reach out to other alumni and you get that's a foot in the door. And we've networked with investors in the US and other colleagues here through networks of other 8200 veterans that build successful companies. Something to say that 8200 alumni, you find not just as entrepreneurs, but also many of the investors in Israel are part of the unit. Shanna, that was supposed to be on this panel, worked at JVP, that is based in New York and Israel. She also works in Deloitte and Deloitte Catalyst team in Israel. So one of the biggest consulting firm in Israel. Most of the team that is doing high tech is ex-8200 or Intelligence Corps in Israel. So I think number one is network of trusted people. And number two is, of course, work ethics and this crisis management ability that we've discussed. Something interesting, and I mentioned that, is that I think what we're trying to achieve with the accelerator that we've built in the last 3 years is less, we're finding the talent that is great tech talent from Israel, but nobody really cares in Silicon Valley. I think so, if you served in 8200 or not. They assume they interact with smart people. The Israelis that they've met, many of them are ex-8200. So, okay, but it doesn't mean a lot to them. So we're trying to actually help those Israeli founders Americanize their value prop and mitigate other risks that are related to business development and fundraising and sales, which aren't the strongest for Israeli founders. And typically the founders we work with are very strong on product and tech, and US founders that you meet here are more business and process oriented. So that's how we're trying to actually complement the Israelis' strength with the network that is and the experience from US professionals, investors, and Israelis that have been here and have built successful companies in the last couple of decades.
It's interesting that you say that the 8200 unit doesn't stick out to a lot of the investors, because for us who are close to Israel, 8200 for us means something like Stanford or Harvard or MIT. So, we take it for granted a little bit.
If you happen to meet an investor that is, part of the AIPAC group, it's a step in the door, but they've also been pitched by everybody in 8200 in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
but many, I think other investors It's nice, but it maybe will bring you to the meeting, but that's it.
That's great. So speaking of being able to adapt in chaotic environments, how are you mentoring your startups during this environment of COVID?
So we we had a batch in California in March, like 10 founders that were in Santa Monica, came here end of February. And about 3 weeks into the program, while we were preparing to go up to the Bay Area and preparing for personal pitch events, COVID-19 hit us. It hit Israel even before. So we had to adjust quickly. We moved everything to Zoom just in the first week of like mid-March. It's now 5 months, and we're now planning to produce our entire next cohort remotely. So meaning that we're gonna do, actually in a hybrid mode, we're gonna do a 2-week programming in Israel, and the rest we're gonna host online. Also, I think we spoke about it just before we jumped on this Zoom, that everybody has Zoom fatigue right now. So when you reach also to investors and when you try to help Israeli founders now engage with clients in the US, you want to have the message on point. You want to be quick. You want to make sure you deliver everything in, let's say, a 2-minute quick pitch. And those are the type of things we're trying to help the Israelis initially, and have those, first meetings with prospect clients and mentors here. We're lucky, we're fortunate that the tech sector, everybody are on the same boat right now. So everybody are on Zoom. But some of our alumni are struggling these days, specifically those in the B2B enterprise sector, or that were delivering services that aimed into industries that were hit by COVID-19, like hospitality, airports. So there's opportunities, but also, some industries have got hit really hard, and startups that provide services to those industries had to cut expenses and just rethink their whole go-to-market approach.
Yeah, it's definitely not an easy environment to be trying to start a company in, for sure. So here are some questions that are coming in from the audience. The first one is, from Dennis Wolf, local to Silicon Valley, here with me. What's the difference between 8200 and Talipot?
And what?
Talipot? Talpiot.
Cool. Okay, Talpiot.
Talpiot. Okay.
So it's Talpiot is another many Talpiot alumni, which is a course that actually is part of the Air Force, end up in 8200. They're one of my best friends went to that program, but it's a 9-year commitment that also the military provides you with a bachelor's degree. And the veterans of that, not the veterans, but the graduate of that program are being distributed among 8200 Air Force and other very more secretive units. All of them, they're like super genius squad of the military, but you'll find them also in 8200 and in other units as well.
Okay. And from Stephen Wishner, do you partner with any Our Crowd in Israel in any of your investments?
Specifically, yes, like we're in touch with Our Crowd. None of our existing portfolio companies got investments, but few almost got investment for them, or hopefully down the road we'll get investment from Our Crowd, as they typically invest now in Series A and after that. And we're very active in the pre-seed and seed stage, but definitely know the Our Crowd guys and really appreciate their work, and hopefully we'll partner on some deals together down the road.
Okay. And so can you tell us a little bit more about about the bus model and the LA ecosystem?
The what model?
The bus model, the business model, sorry. I was reading shorthand here.
The LA ecosystem. So our business model is we're a small fund. So we make 110 $1,000 investments in 12 to 15 companies a year. This year, we've already done 12 investments. So by the end of the month, we're hopefully we'll do 3, 4 more. We take small equity position in all of the companies we're investing in. So it's pretty straightforward pre-seed VC model.
And what's the significance of the 110,000 investment amount?
So many times we're first check in into companies. So I think for when we meet founders, I think in this coming batch, let's say at least half of the companies were the first check in. So when it's like 2 or 3 fully committed founders, it gives them the runway to work, make flights, or right now just put a lot of like efforts in marketing and cover expenses and maybe hire the first developer, part equity and part pay for services. So that's, I think, in the pre-seed stage, it's like bringing on board 2 or maybe 3 angel investors. So that's awesome, but we're happy to come after companies have raised friends and family, or maybe $500,000 or up to $1 million in. And really where we come useful is the accelerator program, in which they get exposure to the US network of clients and investors. And we're very active hands-on investors. And we run this 9-10 week program, March and April, September and October. And the idea is that quickly after the program, they're going to raise a proper pre-seed or seed round of, let's say, $1 million+.
So from Dan Israel here, he wants to know, what does 8200 stand for and why is it called that? Is there any significance behind the name?
There's no significance, I think. It's just every unit in the IDF has a number. It used to be that you could not say 8200, but it became like, there's a Wikipedia now that you can read about it, but the unit actually had a different number when it was established in the 50s, and later on just changed the number.
Okay, and so one more from Dennis Wolf. Do you work with Aleph, Lightspeed, or any other venture capital firms?
Sure. No, we love working with Lightspeed and Aleph. We've been, let's say, Tal Morgenstern, who leads Lightspeed office in Israel, is the usual speaker in some of our events. We're doing a boot camp next month. So many of the VC community in Israel will participate in that. So we're trying to help the Israelis both integrate with the Israeli VC ecosystem, which a recent database that I saw, it's around 200 VCs in Israel. But in the US, there's in multiples more source of funding. So we're trying to help Israelis tap into foreign investors in the US and strategic investors in the US. And eventually, most Israeli companies think globally from day one. Nobody builds a company to be the largest company in Israel. They build companies to be the largest company in the US. And it's not interesting for investors to meet a company that is big in the Israeli market. They want to see the market in the US and the go-to-market approach over there. So that's where we come in handy.
So another question coming in here, is there a particular industry you see 8200 graduates land in or invest in particular? And we know that cyber has been very dominant. So
cyber was dominant. The truth is that we decided that we're not going to invest in cybersecurity. And that's because there's plenty of very sophisticated investors, including multinational investors, that have offices in Israel looking for that specific segment. So it's kind of like negative bias if you're not able to raise from those funds if you're a cybersecurity companies. But look at the recent unicorns coming from Israel. Fiverr, that everybody knows, in the Monday, in the workflow, Lemonade in insurance, Lightrix in computer vision and consumer products. So there's a lot of those new industry wicks. So a lot of the recent unicorns that you're encountering coming from Israel are not in cybersecurity. I think that 8200 graduates have a lot to contribute in terms of machine learning and data analytics. And you'll find that innovation and AI being implemented in other verticals. And I think that's also our approach, trying to take like good, talented data analytics engineers and implement those technologies and know-how on other industries that need to be more efficient. That's our approach, and not necessarily in the security space, in which there's some great friends and partners that are building great companies there.